The movie begins with Kale Brecht and his father, Daniel Brecht, fishing and bonding. After their fishing trip, they start driving back home. On the way, Kale, who is driving, becomes distracted while talking to his mom on the phone. They crash into a parked car, causing their car to overturn. As they struggle to find a way out, having survived the initial crash, another car collides with their overturned vehicle, resulting in Kale's father's death. At school, during a Spanish class, Kale, now a troubled and withdrawn teenager, punches his Spanish teacher, Señor Gutierrez, after the teacher makes a remark about his dad during the lesson. The incident lands Kale in court, where a sympathetic judge sentences him to 3 months of house arrest. On his first day, Kale is fitted with an ankle monitor and a proximity sensor. Detective Parker explains that the monitor will alert the police if Kale steps outside the designated radius and fails to return to the safe zone immediately. It is later revealed that the police officer overseeing Kale is the cousin of his Spanish teacher, Señor Gutierrez. Kale spends the rest of the day playing video games, watching movies and TV shows, neglecting his house chores and leaving his room a mess. This frustrates his mom, Julie, who responds by canceling his iTunes and Xbox subscriptions and cutting his TV cord. Kale becomes bored and starts watching the events unfolding in his neighborhood. He notices a bus pulling over and sees a family moving into a nearby house. Their daughter, Ashley Carlson, catches his attention, and he finds her attractive. While spying on her, Kale hears a noise at the door and goes to check. When he opens it, he finds a package on fire. He quickly stamps it out with his foot, only to discover it's a pile of dog poo. Realizing what happened, Kale hears laughter and spots some children nearby, the culprits who threw the flaming pile of poo on his doorstep. Frustrated, he instinctively chases after them, forgetting about the limited radius his ankle monitor allows him to cover. As Kale overhears the kids mocking his inability to leave the house, he notices his ankle monitor has turned red. Panicking, he quickly rushes back home, and the monitor turns green just in time. However, a police car arrives moments later, and Officer Gutierrez, his Spanish teacher's cousin, puts Kale in handcuffs as a warning before removing them shortly after. Following the incident, Kale decides to mark the edge of his allowed zone by running a rope around it to avoid stepping outside. While doing so, he notices Ashley driving into her house. Intrigued, Kale rushes back inside and tries to figure out which room belongs to her. Once he identifies it, he begins spying on her as she gets ready to go swimming. Soon, the doorbell rings, and Kale's friend, Ronald, fondly called Ronnie, comes to visit. Kale is thrilled to see him and eagerly takes him inside. He introduces Ronnie to his new hobby, spying on his neighbors with binoculars. The two eventually focus on Ashley, who they spot swimming in her backyard. The next day, Kale sits outside his house, waiting for Ashley's arrival. As soon as he sees her driving in, he rushes to the mailbox and pretends to struggle with retrieving letters, hoping to catch her attention. Noticing his struggle, Ashley offers to help, just as Kale had hoped. He seizes the opportunity to introduce himself, and they begin chatting and getting to know each other. However, their conversation is cut short when Ashley's mom calls her inside. That night, while Julie dozes off on the sofa, Kale watches the news about a missing person who is said to have been picked up by an individual driving a car that matches the description of his neighbor, Robert Turner's vehicle. Soon, Kale's phone beeps. It's time to watch Ashley exercise. As he spies on her through his binoculars, Ashley suddenly glances in his direction, making Kale feel caught. However, he remembers that the room is dark, which gives him the courage to continue spying. Eventually, he falls asleep in the chair, still holding the binoculars. When Kale wakes up, he hears Robert Turner driving in and decides to spy on him. He notices that Turner's car, a 1960s Ford Mustang with a dented fender, matches the description of the vehicle mentioned in the news report about a serial killer. The next day, Kale becomes obsessed with monitoring Turner's every move. He invites Ronnie over to share his discovery and suspicions. Later, it's time to watch Ashley swim. While spying on her, Ronnie accidentally knocks the binoculars against the window, creating a noise that catches Ashley's attention and makes her notice them. Not long after, the doorbell rings. When Kale opens the door, he finds Ashley, who claims she got locked out and asks if she can stay with them. As she walks around the house, Ashley spots the binoculars and asks Kale if he's been spying on the neighbors. Ronnie quickly comes to Kale's defense, explaining that they've only been spying on Robert Turner, whom they suspect might be the serial killer from the news. Now friends with Ashley, the three of them begin spying on and monitoring Robert Turner's every move. One evening, they observe Turner driving in with a woman and taking her into his house. They watch as the two eat and drink together. Shortly after, Ashley receives a call from her mom, telling her it's time to come home. Kale walks her to the door and attempts to kiss her, but she gently pulls away and walks off without allowing him to. Kale returns to the house and resumes spying on Robert Turner. To his shock, he notices the woman inside Turner's house running around and screaming for help. He begins recording the scene with his video camera. However, he accidentally flashes the camera's light, immediately alerting Turner. Panicking, Kale quickly hides but continues recording. When the footage becomes unclear, he switches to his binoculars and is horrified to find Turner staring directly at him. Scared, Kale calls Ronnie, who has already left the house, and frantically explains what he just witnessed. While on the call, Kale is stunned to see the woman calmly leaving Turner's house unharmed. This leaves Kale confused and frustrated, as it now appears that he might be overreacting or imagining things. The next morning, while making breakfast, Kale is startled to find Robert Turner standing in their kitchen. Alarmed, Kale becomes aggressive, demanding to know why Turner is there. Julie enters and explains that Turner helped her fix a flat tire. Grateful, she accepts Turner's invitation to dinner, but this doesn't sit well with Kale. Frustrated and suspicious, he walks away, uneasy about Turner's intentions. Kale invites Ashley over and confides in her about his suspicions and fears regarding Robert Turner. Before leaving, Ashley mentions her upcoming party. During the party, Kale spies on her using his binoculars and becomes jealous when he sees her hugging another guy. Frustrated, he sets up his speaker and starts blasting his own music, intentionally disrupting her party. Ashley climbs into Kale's house through the window and, after a brief struggle, manages to turn off the speaker. Kale confesses that he's been watching her since her family moved in and admits he finds her fascinating and attractive. This leads to the two of them sharing a kiss. However, their moment is interrupted when Ashley notices something alarming at Turner's house, blood splattering across his window. They both move closer to observe and see Turner dragging a blue nylon bag with red smears down the stairs and into his garage. Kale, Ronnie, and Ashley decide to investigate further. They devise a plan. While Ronnie sneaks into Turner's car to retrieve the garage door controller's code, Ashley follows Turner to the supermarket, keeping an eye on his movements. She updates Kale on Turner's whereabouts, ensuring Ronnie has enough time to complete his task without getting caught. After some time, Ashley loses sight of Turner and quickly informs Kale before rushing out of the supermarket. As she makes her way to the parking lot and attempts to drive off, Turner suddenly appears in front of her car. He gets into the passenger seat and intimidates her, revealing that he knows she has been following him. Turner sternly warns her to stop spying on him and to pass the message to her friends. After delivering his warning, he exits the car, leaving Ashley shaken. Ashley informs Kale and Ronnie about her unsettling encounter with Turner. She tells them she's no longer interested in the investigation, advises them to drop it, and leaves. However, Kale ignores her warning and becomes even more determined to uncover the truth. While Kale is deep into his investigation, Ronnie visits and nervously admits that he accidentally left his phone in Turner's car. Seizing the opportunity, Kale urges Ronnie to return to Turner's house with a video camera to investigate further. Armed with the garage door opener code, Ronnie sneaks into the garage while Kale watches anxiously from his house. Inside, Ronnie searches for the blue bag they had previously seen Turner dragging. When he finds it, he notices strands of hair and blood on the bag. Just as he begins to process what he's seeing, the garage door suddenly closes, trapping him inside. Kale watches through the camera as Ronnie runs frantically, crying for help, before the connection is lost. Panicked, Kale realizes he has no choice but to go to Turner's house to rescue Ronnie, disregarding the ankle monitor, which turns red as he crosses the boundary. Once inside, Kale begins searching for Ronnie, but the police arrive shortly after. Officer Gutierrez, his Spanish teacher's cousin, handcuffs him. Kale desperately tries to explain that his friend has been kidnapped, but Gutierrez dismisses his claims, instead accusing him of breaking and entering into Turner's property. Turner steps out of his house to find Kale and the police officers. Kale desperately accuses Turner of kidnapping and killing people, insisting there's a body in a blue bag in his garage. 2 officers proceed to investigate the garage, but they only find a bag containing a roadkill deer. Disappointed and unconvinced by Kale's claims, the officers dismiss his accusations and take him away, leaving Turner seemingly vindicated. Julie expresses her disappointment in Kale's behavior and tells him she's going to Turner's house to try to prevent him from pressing charges. Kale, worried and anxious, warns her against going, but she insists and leaves. From his room, Kale watches helplessly as Julie walks over to Turner's house, his worry growing with every step she takes. After some time, Kale receives a message instructing him to look at his TV. When he turns to look, he's shocked to see Ronnie lying motionless inside a wardrobe. Kale quickly locates the wardrobe and opens it, finding Ronnie lying still. As he tries to wake him up, Ronnie suddenly jump scares him and then starts laughing. Kale, feeling both confused and furious, grabs Ronnie by the shirt, expressing his anger and frustration. Ronnie apologizes to Kale and inserts a video of his escape onto the computer for Kale to watch. While reviewing the footage, Kale makes a startling discovery: the woman who visited Turner that night never actually left the house. Instead, it was Turner, disguised as the woman, who drove her car away to avoid raising suspicion. At the same time, Julie, having met with Turner and thanked him for not pressing charges against Kale, begins to take her leave. However, Turner suddenly attacks her, hitting her head against the wall and incapacitating her. Afterwards, Turner sneaks into Kale's house, where he finds Ronnie downstairs and knocks him out with a bat. Turner then goes after Kale, but Kale spots him just in time and manages to dodge the swing of the bat, narrowly avoiding the attack. Turner gives Kale a chase, and when he catches up, the two engage in a fierce struggle. Kale manages to break free and runs out of the house, attempting to cross the ankle monitor boundary to trigger the police alert. However, Turner catches up with him before he can succeed. Turner knocks Kale out, gags and ties him up, and drags him back into his room. Turner tells Kale that he plans to frame him for Ronnie's murder, claiming it was out of jealousy over Ashley. He also accuses Kale of killing his own mother, insisting she would never stop blaming him for his father's death. Turner hands Kale a pen and paper, forcing him to write a confession. Just then, Ashley calls out to Kale from nearby, distracting Turner. Seizing the moment, Kale hits Turner in the face. A struggle breaks out between the three of them, during which Kale manages to push Turner down the stairs. Kale and Ashley quickly escape, locking themselves in a room. Inside, Ashley cuts the tapes binding Kale's hands, allowing him to free himself completely. Kale tells Ashley that they need to cross the boundary line so his ankle monitor will trigger a police alert. As he explains this, Turner begins smashing the door, trying to break into the room. With no time to waste, Kale and Ashley jump out of the window, landing in Ashley's swimming pool. The impact activates Kale's ankle monitor again, successfully alerting the police. While Ashley goes back home to make sure the police are on their way, Kale heads to Turner's apartment. He breaks into the house, desperate to find his mother. Inside, Kale discovers disturbing proof of Turner's previous murders, including a woman's identity card, wig, shoes, and other accessories. Shortly, Officer Gutierrez arrives at Turner's house and enters, unaware of the danger. As he walks through the passageway, Turner appears from the shadows and kills him by snapping his neck. After a tense and exhaustive search, Kale finally finds his mother, Julie, tied up and gagged. As soon as Kale cuts the rope binding her, Turner suddenly appears behind Julie and attempts to kill Kale. In a moment of desperation, Julie stabs Turner in the leg, giving Kale the chance to impale Turner with a pair of gardening shears. The force of the attack causes Turner to fall, ultimately leading to his death. The next day, Kale's ankle monitor is taken off earlier than scheduled for good behavior. Kale meets with Ashley, and they kiss on a sofa while Ronnie videotapes them. This concludes the movie. Please like, comment, and subscribe for more videos like this. Thank you for watching.